and welcome to my rank order of, as far as I'm aware, all the available live-action TV and movie adaptations of Louisa May Alcott's Little Women. I can't seem to fancy the animes or the televised opera, but 9 is more than enough. Better get started. In ninth and last place is the 2018 modernised movie. I don't believe this could ever really have worked to my satisfaction because in the 2010s, the lives that the characters have and the challenges that they face are not the same as in the 1860s, but it might have been watchable if they had not made Jo a horrible human being. This is nothing against Sarah Davenport. She does everything that they ask her to do, i.e. play Jo as a malicious, obnoxious bully. And I feel quite resentful of the idea that this is the way to modernise the, shall we say, least Victorian of the sisters. The cast is so suitable. All the girls look the part, including an older and a younger Amy, which sounds like a compliment, but really it means that to me it's just a waste. And they had Leah Thompson as Marmee. They could have made a really very good traditional Little Women with that cast, and I wish they had. In 8th place is the 2019 theatrical film, which I know a lot of people love. I don't love it for a couple of reasons. One is that I don't think the non-linear storyline works. The connections don't seem to me to be very clear or cohesive, and I've heard people who aren't familiar with the story say that they found it impossible to follow. It also means that some bits get smushed together. For instance, Beth can't really enjoy the gift of Mr. Lawrence's piano because she's already sickening for scarlet fever, and it also means bits are missed out altogether. For instance, Meg and John don't have a moment of realising they're in love with each other or deciding to get married. I'm also not very keen on the way that things are spelled out. This film takes Alcott's subtext and translates it into protracted speeches that are totally lacking in subtlety, and I don't think that's a very good viewing experience. It doesn't invite you to think, to use your intellect, but then we have been told all along what this film was trying to accomplish and how. There's no need to think, and I don't like that either. I feel that Florence Pugh's Amy has been badly directed when she's saying Alcott's dialogue as a sour-faced nag, and badly written when she's playing a 5-year-old child in the body of a 23-year-old woman. I enjoy what Emma Watson does. I find her engaging. What she does is not suitable for Little Women, I don't think, in any role. But whenever I see the assertion that being an outspoken feminist makes her unsuitable to play Meg because she chooses to be a wife and mother, it makes me want to just, well, educate the writer. Saoirse Ronan is undoubtedly very accomplished, very dedicated. I find her Jo is a little bit studied and not as natural as Eliza Scanlon's Beth. She's my favourite March sister in this. I do enjoy Laura Dern and I do enjoy Meryl Streep. In 7th place is the 1949 theatrical film, which I get the feeling was MGM selling an aesthetic, a feeling, an experience. I don't think they were too fussed about the script. Finding out that they bought the project halfway through, it makes sense to me, and please correct me if you have the proof that I am wrong, that they bought half a script and adapted the other half from the 1933 script because it is very nearly exactly the same in places.
Oh, I don't want to be a writer anymore. I want to sing. Da-da-da-dee, da-da-da-da-dum. Thrill millions of people with my beautiful voice. They cheer and throw flowers at me like that.
Bravo, bravo. But I wouldn't make up my mind
too soon. After the art museum, you wanted to be a sculptress. After the circus, you thought the bareback
was the most beautiful thing in the world.
I know, but to sing like that.
You saw a young and handsome Professor Bear there. I don't think the poor guy really knew what to do with lines that had already been written for a more traditional Professor Bear. I do think that the actors were all chosen to do one thing and one thing only. For instance, in the 1940s, MGM would often use Margaret O'Brien as a tearjerker to pull the heartstrings. And thinking about this has helped me come to terms with them swapping Amy and Beth's ages. Margaret O'Brien is suitable as the sister who dies and makes the audience sad and therefore doesn't have to grow up and get married. Elizabeth Taylor's Amy has very little to do when she does grow up. I do enjoy her comical younger Amy. Again, really one thing. I really didn't like the film the first time I saw it, and then finding out about filmmaking in the 1940s and MGM has helped me to work out and understand what they were trying to do, something that 2019 doesn't give anyone an opportunity to do, and come to terms with it. It is very bright and colourful and must have looked pretty visually stunning at the time. I'll say now that I don't care what any of these adaptations look like. In sixth place is the pair of Studio One episodes, Meg's Story and Joe's Story, from 1950, only a year after MGM, and by the way, Elizabeth Patterson, who played Hannah in 1949, plays Aunt March in 1950. We can see there already that they've done something Alcott would not approve of, making the focus of each episode the love story of one of the sisters and her marriage to the man being the end and aim of each episode. It is very 50s. These adaptations from the first half of the 20th century are considerably less feminist than the book, and in many places this adaptation is quite true to the source material. In others, it makes its own little changes, 50s type changes. For instance, in order to show off Mary Sinclair as Meg, they put her in the kind of dress that in the book you would have to peer pressure her into borrowing. She couldn't afford her own. But in this, she has one and she wears it quite comfortably, and then astonishingly Joe has one too, but I can't be too hard on it for that because we saw Katharine Hepburn had the same kind of thing, and she's much higher on my list. I think mostly the cast is very good. They commit to their roles. Barry Kroger as Mr. Lawrence included. Although he is clearly a man in his 30s walking with a stick and wearing a silly beard, he certainly commits to his lines. I think all the sisters are good. I enjoy Nancy Marchand's Jo. Very positive, upbeat, usually smiling. She brings a lot of energy. That's what she brings out of the book. A great energy and a great presence. Laurie is a bit of a funny one. I feel like he has an air of waiting for the other actor to finish their line so that he can say his, and John Brooke is a very funny one. I honestly get vampire vibes from him. He sounds like he's tricking everyone, particularly Meg, into believing he's a tutor when actually he's a vampire.
Did you go into the army?
Yes, I did, but I was wounded and sent home.
Oh, I see. Will you have to go back?
No, I've been discharged. Not too dishonorably, I hope. I'm trying to earn enough money so that I can go into business for myself.
But I don't mind that. I find that quite amusing. It does mean, I think, that Joe and Professor Bear's chemistry is much better than Meg and John's. I like the two of them together. In fifth place is the 1970 BBC TV series. I don't care how it looks, as I said, i.e. very 70s BBC. It doesn't sound that great with the British actors attempting American accents, and they're really a mixed bag. For me, at the bottom of the bunch is Meg. I don't think the script put an awful lot of effort into her, and Joe Rowbottom's performance doesn't really manage to find anything other than the silliness that they associate with Meg's envy and vanity. And I don't blame her for that, and her American accent isn't that great either. And then at the other end of the scale, you have Stephen Turner as Laurie. With 9 episodes and well over 3 hours of runtime, the script has time to delve into his story, and Stephen Turner makes the most of it and does an American accent that sounds probably the best one to my untrained ear. The BBC made in the 1970s a lot of these adaptations that were very faithful to the books, and I love that. In this case, there is the odd change here and there, a lot of them to do with staging and locations and basically saving on the budget, which was not very big. In fourth place is something which is in many ways rather similar, the 1978 American TV miniseries. It's similar in that it's from the same decade and it has well over 3 hours of runtime and is able to go into a lot of detail. The back of my DVD says it has been hailed as the most faithful adaptation, comparing it to the movies, including the newer 1994 film, I think. And I have a bit of an axe to grind about that. It's not more faithful, it's longer, it's able to include more detail, but it does make its own changes here and there, which I don't really mind. It also has a flair for the dramatic. For instance, receiving the telegram about father's illness interrupts the picnic with the Vaughans, which might be a bit much. But I do enjoy the series. I enjoy everything to some extent, except the 2018 film. But this one's high up on my list, number 4. I think the performances are good. I think the story is well adapted. It pips 1970 for having American actors and a lot more depth to their Meg, who is ably played by Meredith Baxter Burney. I also enjoy Susan Day's Jo. She's not very tall, which means she doesn't look like Alcott described, but never mind, she interprets the character very well, in my opinion. And I do enjoy her chemistry with William Shatner as Professor Bear, which seems like a peculiar bit of casting, not unlike what 1949 did with their casting of Professor Bear, but I do feel that William Shatner, with the original script they gave him, really brings something to the adaptation with his performance. It's a bit bizarre, but I like his Professor Bear, and I like this adaptation. In third place is the 1933 film, which famously stars Katharine Hepburn. As I said, it is guilty of some of the same things as Studio One in 1950.
I don't have an opera dress.
But in the same way that television was young then, talking pictures were very young in 1933, and they did want to sell something to an audience. Both the movie experience and a true and faithful adaptation of the book. All the girls look the part. Katharine Hepburn is my favourite Jo. Not only does she look like her, but she embodies the character and plays the character really very well, in my opinion. In the early days of cinema, they did tend to showcase one or two major stars, and in this film it is just the one, Katharine Hepburn, which means that Meg, Beth and Amy's stories do get a little lost, particularly in the second half. Everyone is well cast, first of all to play the character pretty much as Alcott envisioned, and also to back up Katharine Hepburn, and all of them, I think, do both of those things very well indeed. Those early films did have a very theatrical style. It doesn't feel real in the sense that many adaptations do, and for that reason, the adult Joan Bennett's Amy doesn't feel so incongruous and out of place as in the more modern adaptations. And I can say the same for Lois Hall and Studio One, actually. I think it's a very clever script for something without a precedent, if we don't count 2 very short silent movies. This is the first time any writers have taken Alcott's story and adapted it into a 2-hour film, and I think they've done that extremely well. In second place is the 1994 theatrical film, towards which I have an extreme bias because I was a child when this came out and it was really my introduction to the story, and I became a bit obsessed with this film. Trying to be objective, it doesn't get top spot because I feel some of the changes are a bit much or a bit unnecessary, such as Marmee coming and actively saving Beth's life when Dr. Bangs was baffled. Other parts of the story are played down, such as Jo not being directly responsible for Amy falling through the ice, which takes away some of the point, but I do love to watch it, and reading the book several times from childhood has made me think that the way the actors interpreted the characters and put them across to me was correct. They don't all look the part. Winona Ryder is not ugly and awkward, probably in anyone's opinion, and she wouldn't make an awkward Victorian like Katharine Hepburn did and Sarah Davenport would have. But apart from that, I think she plays Jo very well. The script, combined with Trini Alvarado's performance, finds a lot of depth to Meg. She's very kind and gentle, and you can be those things in addition to being vain and envious. Samantha Mathis as older Amy doesn't get an opportunity to do anything much that wasn't set up by Kirsten Dunst. That was inevitable. Kirsten Dunst is fantastic as Amy March, not least because she's a child, unlike most of them, and she was also a very talented child. I like that Samantha Mathis has plenty of screen time, and more than 1949 and more than 1933, they give attention to Amy's story, Meg's story, not quite so much after she's married, but it's more about all of the sisters than those earlier films. As you'd expect at that time, it does take a very feministic approach, and a much more subtle one than 2019.
Why must you?
If I don't, I'd have to defy grandfather.
Yes, and not the whole of society.
It was a massive part of my childhood, and I don't know if I'm being deliberately overly aware of my bias when I put it in second place, but I do also love the 2017 TV miniseries, which is in my top spot. Now, I've been polite about all the actors so far. If I don't happen to think they're suitable, if I don't find them personally appealing, I've kept quiet about them, but I am going to be a bit rude about Michael Gambon, who plays Mr. Lawrence. My feeling is that he just does everything the same without really interpreting the character, and I can't even tell if he's attempting an American accent or not.
Oh, my word. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you, but I once had a daughter who loved this piano as much as I loved her.
Apart from him, I think the cast is all great. All the girls look the part. So does Laurie. Willa Fitzgerald, Maya Hawke, and Catherine Newton are all American, which helps. And in all the other British actors, I can't detect anything wrong in the American accents, except maybe John Brooks isn't that great. But I've no objections to any of the rest of the cast. In fact, I think they're very good indeed. Maya Hawke's Jo can sometimes be a little snippy where the script demands it. That's a bit of a shame. I love Willa Fitzgerald as Meg. I think that she has an appeal. She just makes me like her. And then the script is kind to her too. Again, between the performance and the script, they find that depth to Meg and prove that you don't have to be silly as well if you are vain and you are envious. And again, it's long. It's able to be very faithful to the book, again with the odd change here and there. Mostly it's the order of things getting switched around in order to have cliffhangers in certain places. I'd rather Amy were a child for the first half. The school full of grown-up women with pigtails looks a bit peculiar. It isn't perfect. None of these adaptations is perfect. But one of my favourite things is the inclusion of France and Emile, Professor Bear's nephews, and their proper backstory. Their mother married an American, and then they both died, so Professor Bear had to come and look after the boys, who are missing from the theatrical films. And William Shatner does have a France and Emile, but their parents are alive, so what's he doing in the USA? I think this adaptation does wonderful things with Mr. March, played by Dylan Baker, also an American. Besides being the only one in which I notice they use his name from the book, I think this adaptation uses him more extensively than others, not least because there are scenes of him being a chaplain in the Civil War, sending and receiving letters, so he feels like a part of the family even when he's away. And I feel that the script and the performance successfully convey Robert March's unworldliness, that great altruistic naivety that we get from the book. So overall, it's a fantastic, lengthy, well-cast, true and faithful adaptation, and my number one.